Welcome to the Squad Games Podcast. Squad Games Podcast.
So, some things that we talk about on this are things that I'm really bad at, other than color theory, right? And matching, greens and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I found a music artist that I thoroughly am enjoying. I have no idea what kind of music it is, but it's called Witch Z. So it's witch and then like witches, but it's just witch.
Is that a
Z?
genre of music?
No, it's like an artist.
Oh, I don't know.
So when you're saying witches, I was like, oh, witches with like a Z at the end, and then you're making it weird.
Then it was weird. Like every time I'd pull it up and I try to like play it in like my history, or whatever, it always gives me like this weird like anime punk stuff afterwards, and I'm like, no, this is not the vibe of this music whatsoever.
Oh, I think I found it. Let me post it in.
It's just witch with a Z.
Yeah, this. I put it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever this is.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I was like, all right, this is, I'm vibing with it lately. I don't know. Adrian, what is your music of choice, my guy?
It depends. Like I've gone through a bunch of different genres throughout the years, but lately I've kind of been circulating between two or three. One is still like my high school throwbacks, like emo, pop punk, stuff like that. Huge, like Say Anything fan and a bunch of bands around that kind of genre. So I'm always like looking for stuff like that, even if it's like newish music that kind of has that like kind of old school, like semi emo, semi pop punk vibe.
Okay.
Number two, I've really been liking like the 80s throwback kind of stuff as well, like a lot of synth wave, and it's kind of like it's a little goofy, but it's also a little like hard and like kind of pumps you up. And I don't know, I like it. I just like it a lot. Like those are the two that I kind of find myself circulating back and forth between, and then like just general like indie and R&B and like a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of, music is like a huge part of what I do in my life every day. So I'm like all into, I just love discovering new stuff and constantly listening to music.
Well, when you listen to this artist, you're going to have to tell me what kind of music this is, because I have no idea.
Yeah, I would hope that I'd be able to tell you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it's like alternative something.
Definitely not alternative. I like glanced with my ears. I mean, look, alternative is such a big hat that alternative is just the kind of like the way to have kind of more, how does someone explain it to me so well? Like things that are designed to have more meaning. And that was at the time when it was around in the 90s and 2000s to call it alternative. You probably still could call the things like that alternative today, but usually it's alternative plus something else. Alternative rock, alternative this,
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of those things. So it's interesting. I'll tell you that.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone else has an idea of it, get on our Discord and let us know what this artist's music is considered, because I don't know, I'm vibing with it.
Hell yeah. I definitely got to check it out.
G, what are you listening to these days?
Let me go pull up my top. All right. I use Apple Music because I've had the discounts for college for years, and
Nice.
Then I never switched it, and I don't get the discount now because I'm not in college anymore. But yeah, I still have it.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah, is what it is. And let's see. So I was listening to an Elton John song called Love Song, because I just watched the movie Men again, and they use that song in it, and it's a pretty good song. I've been listening to Kiltro that's these like Spaniards, I believe. Spaniards? I want to say the Spaniard. Can't 100% remember. And I was listening to Invent Animate for anyone who's into the metalcore scene. And then I have some soundtrack music. So, yep, there it is, Men. The original motion picture soundtrack is on the top right here.
Nice.
See, I trust Giacomo telling me what kind of music things are, because you just named off like 4 genres that I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about.
Sounds like he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I trust him implicitly.
Yeah. I feel like Adrian's a man who'd have like Carpenter Brute and then Turnstiles on his iPod or something.
All right. So I watched the video from Just Another Kill Team podcast, and Can you roll a crits podcast or not podcast, but videos that you were a part of. it was cool being able to see behind the scenes and seeing how you were feeling and thinking after each day.
Yeah.
You know?
That was a lot of fun. It was cool. I recorded a ton of additional video that I'm going to be putting together, like a little vlog that's going to be on Goonhammer within the next couple weeks. I literally, the day I got back from LVO, I went right to bed, and the next morning I got up and got on another flight to Florida for work. So I've just like gotten back now, and I'm like sorting through all the wreckage of the past 2 weeks that I have not been able to attend to. But yeah, that was really cool to be able to record with those guys. We all kind of hung out the whole weekend, and it was pretty cool to be like alongside like two pretty big, or very big podcasters and YouTubers in the Kill Team scene, and just sort of like give everybody that like honest, like, hey, we're just like hanging out in the hotel room. This is like how we're thinking about what happened today. Like, and it's also kind of cool to look back at it retrospectively now, knowing what the results were, because I was still very much like unsure the whole weekend, like what the results would be. And then to actually end up winning the whole thing and placing number one in ITC, like that, it's just like, it's so cool to like have recorded us like in the past, not knowing what the future held. But yeah, in addition to that, I'll have a more comprehensive like vlog of my experiences coming soon on Goonhammer. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, and what's interesting about your win path to win the whole thing was that there's only one person that I actively don't recognize that you played against.
Mm-hmm. Who's that?
And all of them are killers. Like everyone that you played this weekend or this past weekend, absolute monsters. So you played Jonathan Marquis. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Jonathan. He's playing Gellerpox, and you played Jason Stanecki, which he was the winner of SoCal Open, and I think you guys probably met at Worlds, right?
Yeah, we did. We met for the first time at Worlds. Yeah, Team USA.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
Ooh.
Yes, he is.
And then you have Brett Bouchard from Six Sided Legion, also another YouTuber.
Yep.
Who's we'll get to the stats later on in this episode, but he definitely overperformed on Hand of the Archon, which we'll give him. I'm going to give him his dues, but we'll talk about it later. Then we have Vivek, who got second.
Yeah,
you played him round 4.
I played him round 1 of day 2, so that'd be round 4. Yeah.
Then you had Dustin DeLessi.
That's from Warpfire.
Oh, okay, that's probably why I don't recognize him.
Yeah, he was a really, really cool dude, really nice dude. I had a lot of fun talking to him and playing with him. But he's with the Warpfire crew. Yeah,
he also had a really good record at that time of the tournament as well.
Yes, yeah.
And then you ended up playing John Reese, Can You Roll a Crit?
Yep, for the first time ever, actually.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. He's a pleasure to play against. Absolute pleasure. I played him first at Nova, and I graciously lost to him. Graciously.
Yeah, really nice guy. And I'm glad we've kind of like been dancing around each other at all these tournaments we've been at recently.
Yeah.
So it was good to finally play him.
And then you ended up playing Orion, and you've played Orion quite a lot. That guy's a monster.
Yeah, I went from last year, having met him for the first time at last year's LVO. I had never played him, and he won the whole thing. And lately, we've played each other a good deal. We played each other for the first time at the Salt City GT. And then we played each other 2 times at Worlds, and then we played each other the weekend before LVO at a tournament in the Baltimore area. So I guess that makes we played each other maybe 4 or 5 times, but every time we've played each other, the games have always been like literally like a 1 or 2 point margin. Like it's always an incredibly tight game with him, and just like the absolute example of like. Just like every decision matters, and every single point you can score or deny matters. Like, and I've never played closer games than I have with him.
In my opinion, sorry to everyone else in the United States, but you two are probably the best players in the U.S. So it does not surprise me that you guys play so closely all the time.
Yeah, they were good games.
Yeah. And then we have Kellen Foster, right?
Yep.
Who's also, he won the West Coast Championship, so another killer with Novitiates. And then you played Chris Baki, who was playing Vetguard and was looked to be unstoppable until you stopped him,
Yeah. No, that was interesting too. And then the whole talk about like the win path and like the drama in the tournament, like the last round of the tournament after 8 rounds of play in the 9th round, you have me and Chris, who, like, anything could have happened. Vivek, Orion, Chris, or I could have won the entire thing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Because if Vivek had won and Chris had beat me, then it would have come down to, like, actually I think Chris would have just won because he would only had the one loss the whole time.
Yep.
If Orion had won, he would have won the whole thing because he only had the one tie the whole time. But I beat Chris, Vivek beat Orion, and then it came down to tiebreakers between Vivek and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, it literally came down to 2 victory points, like period, over the course of the whole tournament. I think it was like 192 to 190. And like, that's where it just gets crazy. Cause like there were games where I, could have scored 1 or 2 more points here and I made a mistake. But there are also games where I performed above average and I got 1 extra point, or I just went a little bit harder and I got 1 extra point here. And that was literally turned out to be the whole difference in the entire tournament between first and second. And I don't know if we're jumping ahead of ourselves in terms of the ITC stuff, but it turned out to really matter because we had theorized going into this that, second place might have been good enough in terms of the ITC points, but actually it turned out that it wasn't the case. And I needed to get first to be able to overtake Ace, which is crazy.
Yeah. What's crazy is like how many people actually dropped from the event because we had 164, right? And only 131 showed.
Right.
And one person had to leave early because they caught COVID. So before the first round even started, right?
Yeah.
Or they didn't catch COVID. They were informed that someone close to them caught it. So they had to leave
fair,
early.
Yeah.
But
Still biggest kill team event in the world to date, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah, which is a testament to everyone who flew and spent their hard-earned money to come out and play together and make it the biggest one. So thank you to the entire community who did so.
Hell yeah.
100%. So since we last had you on, which was over Nova and having a stellar run there, you only had 1 loss at that tournament, which was amazing. You crushed everyone. The Kommandos have seemed unstoppable. They even got a nerf, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. So how has that nerf affected your Commando style of play? And did you think that the terrain was overly helpful for Kommandos, or did you think it was just Kommandos overall strength?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. Into the Dark is Into the Dark. So as far as the nerfs have gone, the most recent nerf basically being to the forward deploy, you can only do it once and they can't flip their order. So it hasn't really changed Into the Dark at all, except for the fact that the bomb squig cannot get the extra APL, which does actually make it a little bit harder to have the bomb squig, completely safe behind a door and also be able to cover the whole room. So the bomb squig has become for me much more of like an activation gaming piece and then like a backline defender. I'm not the kind of player that likes to just sort of initiative gamble and throw them out in the open because I've just lost that before and then you just lose an operative for no reason. So I tend to have him project a threat range and have my opponents have to respect that, which also means they have to space out. So that gives me more opportunity to come in and pick individual operatives off. So I would say overall Into the Dark, Kommandos haven't changed much. And they've only gotten better with all the additions Into the Dark, because it used to be that, you couldn't sneak, you had to sneaky get after you did the shush ploy, right, at the beginning of the first turn. So as it stands now, one operative on their team can basically get 9 inches up the board and or open a door. And another operative, if you wanted to pair it with a recon dash, could go 6 inches up the board. So in Into the Dark, they're extremely mobile and still very good. And they kind of can pick and choose when they get shot because there's no vantage, there's no nothing. You can just be hidden the whole time. On open,
and they have smoke grenades too.
They do have smoke grenades. I've never really used the smoke grenades.
I heard before Kasserkin, apparently the play was to take smoke grenades into Kasserkin, and then you could open a door and like throw a grenade down, and the Kasserkin were just like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you could
throw
just
a bunch of orcs down there.
Yeah. And then you just kill everything.
Yeah. 100%. It's not a bad idea. Like I've heard some people, I think over in Spain, do it a bit more. I'm kind of like a Choppa guy myself.
Okay.
Like some matchups, depending on some teams, I would literally just run all Choppas and like not just leave the dynamite at home, depending on the matchup. I just like the reliability of the 4 dice and the threat that it projects constantly, But the smoke grenades are cool. There is specific tech that I learned specifically against like Star Striders or Vet Guard who don't have the anti-obscuring, and on Into the Dark, putting it like on your knob, for example. So against Star Striders, if you put the smoke grenade on your knob and you basically have the knob be completely safe behind a door that's at the midline to start the turn, you're going to out-activate them. So you basically threaten an objective. Say it's like capture or secure or something, especially if it's secure. You know, if you give the knob an APL, open the door, charge somebody, and secure the point at the last activation, you can be safe in combat, you can flip the point, and, you know, it just makes them have to spread out. And then if you put 2 operatives down on that point, the knob just opens the door, charges, and kills one guy, and then he's still safe in combat with the other one. And then the next turn, you just kill that guy and then bounce to another already activated operative and just like bounce around in their backlines. They can't do anything about it. And, you know, on turn 2 or turn 3, that's when you drop the smoke, and then it delays it another turn. So like you have the knob the whole game, just like pinballing around Star Strider's back lines while the rest of your 10 operatives just like do whatever they want. So there is some play there, I think, specifically with the knob. I have started to do that in certain matchups. So that's kind of the tech. But as far as like, because 3 EP is just such a big investment, and it really messes with your other choices, especially into the dark, because climbing ropes don't do anything. So I've always been a fan until the open terrain changes. So now switching to open, because that was the initial question, right? How do they feel on open now? Until the open terrain and the metagame changes to be a bit more, you know, light friendly or a bit less heavy, I don't really see the need to use smokes that much, because there's just so much heavy to hide behind him. I would just rather be completely safe than you know, lose the initiative and guaranteed lose one of the 2 orcs that's in the open,
Sure.
You know, gambling on the initiative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to get back to the original question, how do they feel on open? I think they definitely feel like, I wouldn't say they feel worse on open like than into the dark. They just feel worse comparatively, because they used to be like just absolutely broken, not broken, but like 3-4 deploys against certain teams. It's just like, if you mess up, like it's just game over immediately. So there were very few teams that could deal with that kind of pressure right away. So it feels a bit like the 1-4 deploy you do now feels much more meaningful. You have to be very particular about it. There's really no room for error in terms of positioning or the operative you choose or what you do with that operative, because it's just, you know, it's still a CP that you need, but he doesn't have any support anymore. He's really by himself. So you can no longer back him up with a friend or 2, right? Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the team has to sort of foot slog it up the board, you know, just like everybody else, but it feels like a bit slower. So I think on open, they're feeling more fair to play against for me. You know, but I still think that they still just stat check so many teams like Elves and Novitiates and Star Striders have such a tough time into them. Yeah, I mean, so overall, I think they still feel very good and very playable. If they were to get hit with one more nerf, I think GW might want to look at either manipulating just a scratch somehow to make it either, you know, only work on normals or only work once every other turn, or cost 1+1 CP every time, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Because the value you can get from it, like a lot of times at the end of a turn, if I'm looking at like, do I do a combat or not and risk killing or getting killed? I'm like, do I have a CP for just a scratch? Have I burned it yet? Because like you can add, you know, 4 to 8 to 12 wounds to an orc over the course of a game. Oh, yeah. Like as soon as if your orc's left on 2 wounds at the end of a turn, as soon as that clock resets and as soon as you go into the next turn, that orc all of a sudden has like 6 to 8 wounds, depending on what damage they do. And all of a sudden they can't just fight you anymore because you have that active. It's such a powerful tool. And it's such a mind game for your opponent the longer you keep it active. The other thing that you could look at is the 11th activation. I think that the 11th activation just... It doesn't seem like a lot, but it really, really, really allows them to wait just that little bit longer. So against 9 activation teams or 10 activation teams, they have 1, 2, or 3 more activations at the end of the turn guaranteed. And that's like a lot. You know, that's enough for a Rocket Boy and a Daka Boy or not. You know, I mean, like it's a lot to deal with. So at the high level of play where every single activation is really like thought out and calculated and meticulous, having the final activation, now that everybody's got so much better at this game in our community as a whole, means so much. It means so much, which is why elites, I think, are having such a tough time these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You pretty much hit on both the exact same thoughts that I had for the nerfs for the team. So one was probably do something with Just a Scratch, right? Like, I would love to see Just a Scratch on every single team that has one go to not being able to hit, like stop crits. So like
Right.
the Rosary from Vetguard, or the blooded one where you can like pay something to have someone jump in front of a shot, or
Right.
with the same thing with cultists, like you just can't stop crits, right? Like I think that would be a good change for the game.
Mhm.
But I think that what Games Workshop likes to do is just fix a singular thing for each
Right.
team. We saw that with Sneaky Git.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are 2 other teams out there who can still Sneaky Git 3 times because they didn't change the core rule itself, right? And those are 2 Compendium teams. And we did see a lot of Compendium do really well this event. So, maybe we're going to start to see some Compendium coming back, but that's besides the point. So the other one was, I would love to see for Kommandos just to have -1 body. I don't care where it's from. If it's a boy, the normal boy, or you could take away the grot or the guy. I think that one of those 2, if not, I think one of those 2 would probably fix the team.
Yeah, I think, if you were to do both, then I think they probably drop down pretty far. And then it's actually, I don't think they're at the top tier anymore if you do both.
Yeah, I agree.
And which maybe people would be happy to have, because, they might, I don't think they're as bad as Pathfinders used to be, but they might have that Pathfinder effect where people just really hate
drop them.
seeing them at the table. Although they are like such a fun and flavorful team. I really do enjoy the whole, design concept behind it, but that's besides the point. Yeah, I think they definitely probably need another little touch. But those are the 2 areas that I think would probably be the most, the most problematic areas are those 2, I think.
Yeah. So for me, I don't know how about G. I'll ask G the same question. For me, whenever I see an Orc Kommandos player, I always feel like I can win, even if maybe I can't. Right. I always feel that I can win because like they're not as oppressive as Pathfinders used to be, right? And I think that that could change, because I think Games Workshop has had a really hard time balancing melee teams ever since Felgor came out, right? So ever since last May, we have been in the summer of melee, right? Ever since. And it's been, now Kommandos, some people argue that they're also a shooty team and not just I think they're a very balanced team.
Yeah,
they're still very melee forward.
They're
because
like Mario and Super Smash Brothers. They're just jack of all trades.
That's a good one.
Exactly. But like, I mean, we're going to get to Cultists and Felgor here soon, but there are like, those teams still really are dominating. And it's interesting to see that Kommandos and Vetguard are like, Vetguard haven't been touched at all, which is baffling to me.
Yeah, that's gotta change.
Yeah, that demo, man.
I play them and they need to be nerfed.
Being on the receiving end, like,
it's not. Yeah, I've played them so many times now, and I'm just like, not again, man. Like,
it is not.
Live in constant fear of like 4 different things. Like, it's pretty.
Where's the spotter? Where's the demo, man?
Literally.
Did you take all the gunners? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Your leader like ignores this and also has a feel no pain. Like, it's just like, it's a lot. Sometimes these guardsmen just don't die.
Yeah. It's stupid. But like, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, Giacomo, whenever you're playing against Orc Kommandos, do you still have that same feeling whenever you fight a Pathfinder player, or are they just like, how do you feel when you play against Kommandos versus Pathfinders?
The same way, overconfident, not sure if I'm going to win, but going like, I probably could do it. And then like, I go, I ain't posting that shit. I got my ass whooped, No, generally I have a pretty good time against Commando players, whether they're very good or they're just learning the game because they bought the starter set. And the team, like I can kill an orc and then they can kill one of my guys. So it's one of those teams, like we mentioned, was balanced. It never feels one-sided for either. Unless, of course, you're a really good player, then you absolutely know how to do it. And I think orcs are still the team to do that. That can still take it. And we saw here at LVO.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Yeah, because they are like so durable, deceptively so, because they can retain saves no matter what. They can do just a scratch. Like if you make any of your 5-ups, if you spike, then like you get lucky, and then they just don't die in addition. So like it feels good when you make your 5-ups. There's and in the hands of a good player, I think, when you play super cagey and super conservative and just don't give anything out, make your opponent work for every point of damage. They have to work really hard just to be able to shoot or fight an orc. And then when they do, then they start from full health and then the durability kicks in. So that's where I think it becomes problematic. But if you have potentially newer or more inexperienced players just kind of throwing them out there and hoping their stats hold, they will fold very fast to sustained fire because their 5-ups cannot hold forever.
No.
So if you play the terrain really well, and if you play on boards that have a lot of heavy, the orcs can just be guaranteed safe until they are ready to strike out. And then you're getting hit in the face with a full health orc who's 10 to 16 wounds potentially with just a scratch active, which is just like so much to chew through.
And not jumping ropes, just climbing ropes really helps them get around the place too.
Exactly.
So it's just like, it's another trick they have that you don't think about that orcs would have,
And the grot too. I got a few people at the grot this weekend, and I thought I telegraphed it, giving him a 3rd APL. But I got Orion on the first turning point, which I think, thinking back through it, we can talk about that match in a second, but it might have been I jumped the gun maybe a little bit too soon there. But it was the only reason I tied my game with Vivek was to have my grot slingshot all the way down the hallway of an Into the Dark board, dash around the corner, and then loot. I think it was loot we were playing, loot an objective that only one guardsman was standing on that he just had no idea I could get to. So the grot is like is a game changer for sure.
Yeah, I think I was talking to Vivek at some point in time, and I think he told me that exact story. We're gonna get him on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
Him and George.
Awesome.
But yeah, dude, you fucking crushed it, bro. And I just have to say, congratulations, man.
Thank you, man. Genuinely.
Like, biggest tournament ever. Objectively, you are 100% the best player in the world. And fucking fantastic to see.
Honestly, it's like super surreal. It's like, it's really, really surreal because like a year ago this time, like I was playing Intercession and doing decently well, but like, I don't know. I just like how far I've been able to come in a year. It's just like, it's just snuck up on me. I don't know. It's been pretty crazy. Like my goal for this year was to like qualify and attend the World Championships. I had no like hopes or dreams of like winning all these tournaments or like being number one in the world. Like I didn't even think it was possible because Spain has so many tournaments that are happening all the time that are just of such a huge level. But like it's honestly, it's still like, I still can't even believe it, to be honest. Like it's pretty surreal. And it just feels like very real when I hear you say that, but genuinely thank you.
But I mean, it's also true. Like
you earned
there's no lying about it. Number one ITC, won the biggest tournament in the world, went to Worlds, played super well. You played clean. You played the time, the entire tournament. Like you had no complaints about sportsmanship. Your models are always beautifully painted for both years.
Thank you.
We have hobby chats behind the scenes, you and me.
Yeah.
Like seriously, bro, like good shit.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So let's go over some of your matches before we move to some other topics about
100%.
LVO. You played Jonathan Marquis first, with his beautifully painted
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, yeah. How did that go?
That was cool. Every time I play Gellerpox, I just have flashbacks to my games with Orion. And I'm like,
me too.
Immediately traumatized,
Yeah,
so I'm like, all right, like, because it's funny, like there are so many teams in the game right now that I go through phases where, Cults or Felgor or whatever are like the hot team, and I'm like getting my reps in. I'm like, I know everything these guys do, but I hadn't played Gellerpox in a minute because nobody on the East Coast really plays them. So I was like, oh man, like of all the teams, like this is my first matchup. I think he was like the only Gellerpox guy in the whole field, maybe of two. So I was like, all right, like let me review these rules. Let's try not to get got again. I know the tentacle guy like keeps you in combat, blah, blah, blah. So I just was like kind of channeling, what I had learned in my games against Orion. And I think I played pretty cagey. I think what did we start on? Did we start on Capture? I think we started on Capture the first day.
I believe so.
And I'm pulling up my
I think it was Capture, Secure
Loot, and then the next day was Loot.
Right.
CS.
Loot, Capture, Secure.
Then
that sounds about right to me, yeah. So it ended up, I think, so I had actually pretty good dice this game, and the breakout story, the news story from this whole game was that my Slasher Boy single-handedly, like by himself, held up one Nightmare Hulk for 2 turns.
Just a scratch.
Just a scratch, but just also like just dice, like good dice.
Wow.
And his dice were not good. So my Slasher Boy is rolling all hits and all crits, and his mutants are rolling like maybe 2 hits. And he's just like, and then a second guy charges in. It might have been Volgar, I don't know, but he's like there fighting 2 Nightmare Hulks, and he survives the entire game.
Wow.
Until turn 4, when I decide to suicide him so I can open up, these guys to get shot. But like he literally held the line against 2 18 wound mutants for like 3 turns, which was insane. And reminded me like why I play this game. It's like one of these cinematic moments that like only Kill Team can provide,
Mm-hmm.
Really, really cool stuff. I just like was picturing it in my head,
Guy's just sitting there just wawing his brains out.
Yeah, literally got a knife in each hand, a knife in his mouth, and he's just going crazy. Like, these mutants are just like missing him with the big meat cleaver. So that was cool. But I also was able to get a few pretty big blasts off, and the blasts landed. Sometimes your bomb squig jumps into a few dudes and rolls like 1 hit on each, and they make saves, and they're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But this time it was like all 4 landed, and then he didn't make his feel no pains. And
all of a sudden,
these mutants went from like full health to 2 health, and he was like, "Oh, well, that did not go well." So the shooting really tipped the game in my favor, I think. And then also the Slasher Boy holding his 2 mutants up for longer than I think he expected was big. And then just positional play and playing the mission, and then it kind of snowballed from there. But he was a really nice guy, really good to play with. And it is always cool playing against Gellerpox because they're such a weird, cool team. And like just like a big combination of like little flies and huge dudes. And it is a cool thing to see on the tabletop.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that was a good one.
And then you ended up playing Jason.
Yes, on stream.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How did that go? And you guys will be able to watch that on YouTube later this week, hopefully.
Yeah, I actually would love to watch that game back when I have some time, just because it's always cool to see like how the game actually played out rather than like how you remember it playing out.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a good game. It was cool. Again, finally, it was really cool this tournament to travel all this way and actually play pretty much all new players. The only players I had repeated were Chris Baki and Orion. I think everybody else was brand new. So 7 out of 9 games were brand new, which is always just great to be able to play brand new players. It's really, really cool. So that game he took Inquisitorial Agents, and we were on open, and it was long deployments. So like the, you know what I mean? Like the 3-inch deployments on the long sides of the board. And he chose to take Exaction Squad as his support option, which I was like, okay. I mean, I know in theory people are talking about an Exaction Squad being able to handle orcs, but I don't know if the support option does enough there. So I personally thought that maybe he would have been better off taking Vet Guard or Breachers, just the tried and true scary stuff, demo mine, et cetera, et cetera. But he, again, I just played it super cagey, really tight. And then he set up for a charge, I think, at the top of, turn 2, where he had his, it's the Sister of Battle with the double-handed chain sword. It's like, I forget what she's called.
Repentia?
But, no. But on this team, she has a different name. She's the one who strikes you on death on the way down and has a feel no pain, I think. So pretty can hold her own in melee. And he ended up basically winning the initiative, giving her like balanced, I think, because she charged, and I think she gets balanced, and also gave her target quarry. And I felt so bad, but he literally walked in there, rolled. She had combat support too, I think. So she was hitting on 3s, and so she rolled 4 1s and 2s. And then he re-rolled 2 of the dice because of the double balanced and rolled into another 1 and another 2. So like she comes in with 6 dice and whiffs everything. And then my boy just proceeds to just like chop her to pieces. Ugh. So that was a really big, like immediate, like initiative kill. And I think it kind of just like took him out of his game a little bit because he was not expecting that at all. And he was kind of counting on it. And I was counting on it too. I was counting on the boy either dying or living with very few wounds. Either way, from my perspective, where I sat on the table, I don't think it would have impacted the state of the game at all because I had so many orcs just ready to jump onto her after that to finish her off. But it certainly did put him on the back foot, like literally immediately. So the rest of the game was him just trying to catch up from there because I took no damage and then I got to go and make another strong move. So all of a sudden we're 2 moves into, the second turn of the game, and I've won both those moves very decisively, and he's like lost big on both those moves. So that kind of set the tone for the rest of it, and he was kind of playing catch up from there on out. And then the shield guys in the exaction squad didn't really do anything. They kind of just, they made it so I could never kind of fight them, because if you fight them, you just lose. So all I did instead was just like charge in and like bear hug, and we're just going to hang out and be friends, and nobody's going to die, but nobody's going to do, we're just going to stand here together and do nothing. And if I need to do something, I'll just charge it with the second operative and then do the mission action that way. So that's kind of how I played that, and just avoided the big threats. I didn't let him get the plasma cannon blast off, or the Death World vet didn't do too much. And the thing with Inquisition is I feel that they mostly hit on 4s, and if their quarry fails them, as soon as that quarry lived, I either got him to safety, so he's just screwed from his balance for the rest of the turn, his balanced rerolls. They can be a little swingy. They only really have 2 ways to manipulate dice, and one is the quarry and one is the mystic. So at a certain point during the tournament, Inquisition's dice will just fail you, although hopefully not as spectacularly as that sister, because that was just hard. That was just tough to watch. I always feel for people when that happens, because it's never nice rolling a million 1s and 2s.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's Inquisition. Once you get ahead of them, it seems like it's a little bit harder, because the other thing that I found fighting Exaction, whenever I'm playing them, whether it's in Inquisition or not, the shield guys just don't do anything. And it's like, sometimes you want that kind of thing, right, but at the same time, they don't do anything.
Yeah, they don't. And that's okay when you have a whole other Exaction team to run up and shoot into combat. But if you're only running, 5 operatives? So and the board's that's a spread out board there. So his shotgun guy was running around trying to get a shot into combat, and even if he did, it's not going to kill a full health orc, on average.
Right.
So that's the thing. So I think that that I might have played that a little differently. Although that being said, I don't play Inquisition, and I'm sure he knew what he was doing when he chose that. Yeah. It just, the plan didn't work out the way the game played out.
Yeah, I think mathematically they're a really good choice, and I still think that Exaction is still best in Inquisition, but ultimately, it's always better to kill something rather than just tie it up, in my opinion. Yeah. That's how I play Kill Team, at least. I mean, other people play it different, and which is viable.
Especially when you have, on Inquisition, only a few operatives who can really, kill stuff.
Absolutely. But, losing 2 operatives or losing 2 really big moves at the top of turn 2.
Yeah.
And you were playing Into the Dark, correct?
No, open.
Open. Okay. Yep. Open is gut wrenching.
Yeah. That was, I felt really bad, because that was one of his operatives that needed to land big. And it just, 6 1s and 2, it happens. It's happened to me too.
Does.
And it changes games, but dice be dice.
That's so rough.
It is.
So,
rough, yeah.
So moving on to Hand of the Archon and Brett. Brett played really, really well. He was the top rated, Hand of the Archon player at the whole tournament. He did really good. He did really good last year. Typically, I rarely ever see Hand of the Archon beat a good Kommandos player.
Yeah, but he beat 1 or 2 other Kommandos players, correct? I think he played 3 Kommandos
matches. But he didn't beat the best Kommandos player. And he did do really well into what a lot of people consider is their counter.
Yeah.
Like you said, right?
Yeah. I think, he beat Mike Cortez by 1 point, which seemed like a really close game. And then I forget who the other Commando player is, but I remember him talking to me in passing, being like, man, I just can't avoid this. I've just played 3 Kommandos, I was like, yeah, but how'd you do? He's like, well, I won 2. I was like, that's an accomplishment. They are, I think,
especially Mike. Mike is really good.
Mike is a very good player. He's another one from New York, up in Westchester, just a bit outside New York City. But we play with him regularly, and he's a very, very good player. But yeah, no, Brett was a really nice guy. Again, I had kind of heard of him, and I had met Blaine at Worlds, and he had talked about Brett. So it was nice to be able to put a face to the name and play him and sit across the table from him. Really, such a gentleman, and it was a very fun, respectful, good game. he kept it like really close too. Like I think I ran away with it a bit early on, but by the end of the game, like I was kind of just throwing orcs at points and knowing that I like kind of had it, but I was like rapidly losing bodies because when these guys power up, I'm like, wait, you can do what now and what now? Like you could be like a 4 APL model and then dash behind, like what?
Yeah, they become like Goku and Vegeta's.
Literally, yeah. So like at the end of the game, I think I had like 2 orcs left, and he had like a much bigger board presence. So like the very last turn, I think he might have went 4-2 or 4-1 on primary in his favor. But it wasn't enough because I had sort of I think I had got a 4-2 maybe 2 of the turns or something like that. But no, he played it really well. He made some interesting decisions. He chose not to bring the blaster, which is like their plasma, and bring the shredder instead.
Okay, he's trying to get a blast off.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to get a blast off, which I was never going to give him, but maybe more just to have the more dice and try and get the rending, you know?
Yeah.
So to maybe negate just to scratch as much if he has more dice. Maybe that was his thinking there. And then he also brought the other heavy weapon that was not like the melt-a-gun one.
The Dark Lance?
Yeah, it was not the Dark Lance.
Okay, not the Dark Lance.
So no. Well, the shredder. Well, that's the regular gun.
The splinter cannon
might have been the splinter cannon.
Yeah,
I don't know this elvish terminology.
It's okay, I do. That's why we're working together.
But it was the two choices that most I've never seen like in our local matches here with like Nestor, the Brooklyn strategist. Like he would always bring the plasma, effectively the blaster, and then the Dark Lance just for sheer like AP killing power. So that was an interesting choice. And there were a few times where he rolled his 5 dice and didn't get a single crit, but CP rolled into a crit. So then he got 2 crits because of rending, darkness, death, or whatever. So then it kind of paid off. So I don't know. That was definitely a choice. Maybe he felt that it was an uphill match and he had to kind of try that to break through. I will say, though, of all the elf teams, I think Hand might have like the best chance just because of that 6-up feel no pain. Like that changes the combat math just enough that it doesn't make it a guaranteed kill when you roll in there with 3 hits, right?
Especially if you roll well.
Yeah, if you just roll 1-6. If you roll 1-6, all of a sudden I need 3 hits to kill you, you know what I mean? Or a hit and a crit. Absolutely. And I don't really want to pay CP for WA, so
yeah.
Right.
So they're actually like deceptively hard to kill in combat, but even still, like if orcs roll average and I also have the shooting and the durability, like I just like exist. And I have like a bunch of orcs running around with 2 health and there's still a problem. So I still think it's a very tough match. It's definitely winnable, but in a vacuum where both players are playing at the highest level, I think that it's definitely still, favored to Kommandos significantly enough for it to be uphill for the Dark Eldar.
So I know you didn't get to play against Blades of Cain, but have you practiced into them at all?
I have.
Do you think that they're any kind of good? Or I still think that people are going to suck with this team for a really long time. It's my opinion.
Yeah. I think they're a tough team. They seem really, really fun. I've played against Travis once on them, and he was just trying them out, I think, for the first time. And I think he tried a mono striking Scorpion build just to see how it was. We were just kind of messing around, throwing, stuff at the wall. Yeah. It did not go well for him. It did not go well for him. So I think he's thinking, or we're thinking now, maybe Banshees might be more the way to go against orcs. I mean, if the Scorpions charge you, they get their 2 mortals, and all of a sudden, then you're in scary range. But again, 10 wounds, just a scratch. Their dice have to be perfect, and they're still elves. Like they still fold. Like if you shoot them, like they're mostly going to evaporate, and they just don't have the number of bodies. I think to me, they kind of run into the Void Dancer problem, which is another bad, or good matchup for orcs, right? Mm-hmm. They just don't have enough bodies and wounds and armor saves to keep them alive for long enough. And they want to be in combat with the Banshees and the Scorpions, but they just don't have the staying power, I think.
That's fair.
But they have a ton of tricks, and I think that a good player could probably get, until people figure them out and what they do, I think good players are going to be able to abuse a lot of their aspect techniques and to some success. But overall, I still think that any 8 wound team in Melee that only has like 8 to 9 operatives is going to struggle into Kommandos because that's just math. Yep,
absolutely. So moving on to your first game of day 2, which was Vivek, who got second place. You ended up tying this one?
Yeah, we did. It was a really, really close game. And Vetguard, never underestimate Vetguard. Not that I did, but just never underestimate them. So this was day 2. We were on Into the Dark for all our 3 games in day 2. And I think it's one of those things where, like, your win path to a tournament, so many things have to go right. You have to get the right matchups at the right time, on the right maps, on the right missions. Your dice have to be good. Your decisions have to be good. Other players in other games have to do certain things. You know what I mean? So this was one of those things where, like, if anything had be different in an alternate reality, it would have been a completely different game, I think. He played it very, very tight, very well. I think the map was probably a bit in his favor. I want to say it was a traditional GW one, right? So it was a symmetric layout. He won the roll-off, so just got the flat benefit of being the attacker. And this map had, 2 objectives on the center line. So he was able to get the initiative, effectively shush his guardsman forward, to use orc terminology.
Yep.
So that he had...
As any true orc player would.
Exactly. And so he had, G2 guardsmen at both of these doors poised to take both of these middle points and hold me to a 4-2 the first turn. And the only way I could have done anything about that was to basically throw my comms or my knob onto those points with the 3rd APL to take one, after he took the first one, and then just guaranteed that orc would be dead. So I played conservatively, and I was like, I'll let him take the 4-2 this turn in favor of not losing any orcs, and I should be able to get one later in the game. But he just held and held and held, and I was not able to break through. And this is, talking about dice be dice. I had, I think, 3 subsequent melee activations where I had my Slasher Boy or a regular boy or some other orc with a choppa in combat against a regular guardsman, just get 1 hit, 3 times in a row. So not only am I not killing guardsmen, but I'm taking more damage than they're taking. And it really shifted the side of the tide on this, my left side of the board, his right. And I had to kind of abandon that completely. And push harder up the other side. So the game was looking like I was going to lose it, to be honest. And I did that play with the Grot that I mentioned earlier. And I kind of I waited for him in this one room where he had 3 or 4 guardsmen on his side in a very safe room. And I waited till he had activated all of them and saw that only 1 guardsman could ever be on the point. And then I immediately gave the A-pill to the Grot, and I was like, I'm going in here. Basically, the Grot was the hero. He ran in and stole that point to get me the 4-2 I needed to tie the primary. I think that was turn 3. So he went 4-2 the first turn. We went 3-3. Then I went 4-2. Then we went 3-3. So we tied in the primary. And he had done very good in his secondaries as well. And I think the map also benefited that. He was taking central control, secure central line, and the control 2, control more attack up. So he was able to max all that stuff out. And I have a tendency, and I think some other people do, to sort of forget about these security tac ops because they're just on this specific map, he could safely control the center line from his home room without any interaction from me. And for me to put multiple orcs there was just so out of my way and such a bad idea that it just I was not incentivized to do it. And I also just kind of forgot about it. And same thing with the center line. It was just not beneficial for me to be there. I was outside of cover, off the objectives, just ready to get shot. So he kind of was able to play his secondary game very well. And I was able to at the last activation of the last turning point, pop a very crucial Robin Ransack to tie the game. So it was a nail biter. It was a really, really, really close game. And I did not think I was actually coming out of that game. I fought as hard as I could to scrape out a tie there. And again, one of those things where some dice rolls and then, the map that you're playing, really impact the flow of a game. Compared to, if those dice rolls had been average and if the map had been a bit more I have my 3, you have your 3.
Yeah.
Not complaining at all, but it's just interesting to think about how that game progressed and how it got to where it got. But an excellent game. He was very, very fun to play with and a really good guy. And we had a good time. And it was nice to meet him and see more of the Canadian scene here in the US.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, Vivek seemed like he was a really stand-up guy having a lot of fun. So I'm glad that you two had a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely we did.
Now for your next Into the Dark match.
Mm-hmm.
You played against Space Marines. Did you end up playing on an asymmetrical this one, or did you?
We did. We did. I believe we played. It was definitely one of yours. If I pulled up the packet, I could tell you exactly which one it was.
No worries.
But yeah, no, that was a good one. So that was against. I believe that was against Dustin.
Correct.
Dustin from Warp Fire Minis, and he was playing Intercession, and. That was it was a good one. It was nice to meet him. He's a really nice guy. It was a bit more straightforward. I kind of had my game plan and I stuck to it. And I've kind of figured out like what to do against elites and Into the Dark. And it's really hard for them to do anything about it. Because all you need to do really is like not even dangle, but just put like one of your disposable operatives, like a regular orc boy who, and I use disposable lightly because they're very hard to remove, but it's like the lowest tier operative you have. Put them on a point, do the objective, and then just like hide all your big guns behind a door and be like, go kill this guy. I dare you. Like I got like a rocket and dynamite. I had a couple points tied up in Eliminate Guards and Headhunter on his leader. And I kind of like dangled the bait, and his leader, one guy came in to try and kill the orc, a regular guy, and actually couldn't get it done. I just like rolled well and had just a scratch, and the orc was left on one wound. So he charged his leader in to finish him off and get rout and all the rest of it. And then I just like opened the door and shot a rocket in and deleted a guy and splashed the other. And then the slasher boy came in with throwing knives and threw, charged, fought, and finished him off. So like at the beginning of turn 2, he had like 2 Marines down to my 1 orc. And it was very, very uphill from there on out. He kind of like stuck on his objectives and just went on guard and played it safe, which was fine because I think he held it to 3-3 on the primary every turn until the last when I finally broke through. But I just was able to play around his guards and get my secondaries and deny some of his and just go forwards from there. But I think it's really tough for elites. Also, he chose to take more bolters than I thought. I like to take a lot of assault intercessors into orcs because like you're not going to shoot them that much into the dark until I let you. Right. I'd almost rather be in combat and get the kills that way. But really, really nice guy. I think it's a tough matchup against an experienced orcs player, Mm-hmm. But I did really enjoy the asymmetrical maps there. I had practiced a few of them prior to LVO. And I think I haven't played all of them, but the ones I have played, I've really, really enjoyed. And it adds another element to it. It makes the dice roll off actually a lot more meaningful before the game. And a lot of these maps I found I actually do want to take Defender if possible. But it's always just nice to create a new puzzle that you have to like kind of solve after the old ones get stale.
Yeah, it's interesting. This was our 3rd iteration and obviously our best so far. Mm-hmm. So
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Our first 2 were not particularly good, especially our first one. The first one was like, didn't know what the fuck was going on. But no, I'm glad. And now what's also interesting is that you're tied to Vivek. Mm-hmm. Your next game, you beat John Reese. And the most interesting thing about Pod B was since you beat John in your next match, mm-hmm. There was no undefeated coming out of Pod B. So at the end of day 2, we actually had just 1 undefeated. Yeah. So tell me about John Reese's match.
It was good. It was, again, like really, really happy that we finally got to play because we like have kind of hung out and been in the same circles at some of these more recent tournaments.
Yeah, New York Open too, right?
Exactly. New York Open, we dodged each other. Nova, we dodged each other. But like we've been kind of hanging out and chatting at these events, and he like hangs out with some of the guys like Travis with New York Crew. So it's cool to be able to hang out and interact and chat Kill Team and talk shop. But again, this is one of those matchups where like especially on Into the Dark, like I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is really, really, really hard for Star Striders to beat Kommandos. Again, all else being equal. Mm-hmm.
I think that was the running joke in your guys' video. How long can you dodge Kommandos?
Yeah, literally, exactly. And that's the thing with the tournaments. You never know. I went to Nova, and there were how many Kommandos players there? Like a million.
There was like so many.
I didn't play a single one. I didn't play a single one. Mm-hmm. Right, which is crazy, but it happened. So he eventually ran into Kommandos, and it did not go well. No, I ran the smoke on the knob, and this was another one of your boards. Again, really cool to play. So the knob was able to get basically with his 9-inch move and open door. He was able to get like to the mid board behind the door,
Love
just
that.
just ready to open it and be like, "Hey, dude, give me something to kill." And you know, he was able to do that. And I forget if he flipped a point or charged and fought someone, but he definitely impacted the game there. And basically, the way I play that matchup is I just hide in melee. Like the assassin's going to kill an orc for sure, but usually will die to the second one. And Vayne like will probably kill an orc, but die to the second one. You know, so those are the two operatives they really have that can do stuff, including the Void's Master. But if you just like, since you already out activate them, all you need to do is charge their already activated models and then just wait. And then they have to activate that model before you have to do anything. And you just bounce around from model to model, hiding in combat, which they can't do anything about. And that's why I think it makes this matchup kind of impossible. And doing that, like you can, like I denied him getting an asset off the entire game because of that.
Amazing.
So if you play it super tight, you know, and just wait to activate your dudes until they have a safe place to land and hide, I just don't see how Star Striders win that match. You know, I don't see it. But yeah,
I love that because they're actually a really difficult match for Vet Guard.
Yes,
and it's interesting to see how you play them. So maybe other people who have struggles into this team might be able to take, you know, hide your dudes until it's ready, until they can be safe.
Yeah, literally. And also, like the thing is with orcs too, like because if you with Star Striders, if you throw a dude up early on in the turn order, you know, activate him, finish him around the mid board, and then pass. That's when they get that asset off, right? So what you need to do is you always need to have a dude that's like protecting your midline, because their Star Strider's threat range for assets is like really far. They can get the extra inch, they can recon dash, you know, and then it's 2 inches of where that operative lands, assuming you're in cover. So that's like pretty far up the board. But as long as I have an orc ready to charge whoever they throw up there to try and get the asset off the next activation, I'm completely safe. So like the people you have closer to them need to wait as long as possible to activate. So they can respond to that attempt to asset you. You know, obviously this is assuming you out activate this team. If you don't, then it's going to be a bit harder. But orcs do just by one, assuming they don't get that asset off.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to take that. I have never fought Star Striders, luckily. Usually when I fight a team first time, I lose. There's not a lot of Star Strider players out here other than James Robinson. And then I think Wyatt plays it too in SoCal, but that's about it.
Isn't it crazy how there are just certain places where teams just aren't played, like as big as this game is getting? It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting seeing where metas like develop and change. Yeah. Like Pacific Northwest has a completely different meta than the rest of the United States as well, too. You know, 100%. So it's interesting to see, you know, and then when everyone comes together at LVO, you kind of see.
Yeah,
it's also there's another interesting bit outside of yourself. Any tournament that you've been going to lately, you just win. But like KTO was won by a West Coaster, right? Mm-hmm. And then like, when you guys have to travel to the West Coast, you guys win. So it's very, very fascinating to see the ping pong ball go back and forth. But exactly. You've been holding on to all the ping pong balls lately.
Well, that last season was a pretty cool one. Yeah,
very well deserved.
I happened to just get into orcs back in like I don't know, April or May of last year when they were still like fine, and then I just kind of committed to playing them, and they got better and better, and I really liked them, and I'm just gonna like play this team for the whole year and see what I can accomplish, and it went pretty well.
Yeah. So you end up playing Orion next. You've played quite a few times. Mm-hmm. How did that game go? Because it came down. I think both of you timed out at the end, and we on stream in order to see where that model was. We had to go back and make sure, and the measurements were well within, so it was a fucking sick ass ending. Tell us about it.
I know that always just had to give you a little bit more drama on stream, you know.
that's never a bad thing.
Yeah. No, that was a great game, and I was feeling pretty good going into it. But again, I think I was maybe I overestimated how many shots I could get off on Felgor, because if Kommandos can get shots off on Felgor for the first 2 turns, I think it's very favorable for them.
Mhm.
But I wasn't really, again, with the heavy terrain, it's good for Kommandos, but it's also really good for Felgor.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really, he was kind of able to dictate when I got shots off on his guys.
Mhm.
So I wasn't able to do anything until he had already activated, charged, killed people. But the way that game went in a nutshell is I put him in a very tough place turn 1. It was turn 1 at the end of the turn. I kind of took a more favorable side of the board. I won the roll off. I was able to shush and get pretty much like my 4 points secured. And I was able to get 2 of his. And in the last activation, I gave the Grot an APL and swung him around and denied him a point. So at the end of the first turn, it was 4-1 in my favor. And he had a lot of like fighting back to do from there. Mm-hmm. So that kind of made him basically say, all right, well, I got to just charge forward and kill a lot of orcs now, which he actually just did. So he just charged into my orcs, and I'm like, all right, that guy's dead. Like charged into the orc, that guy's dead. Like the combats were so decisive that it didn't even make sense to use just a scratch, because I would have still died anyway. So like, these guys are gnarly in combat. So he charged in and just did the thing. He stunned some dudes with the Tox Horn, which made it tough for me. And he fought back. And then it was looking like, beginning of turn 3, midway turn 3, I was like, I don't know if I have this game anymore. So he was doing very good in his tack ups for the most part. I was sort of slowly getting mine. But I think there were a few decisive moments where I think the game was probably won or lost. One, I believe it was the top of turn 3 or the top of turn 4. I had 1 CP left, and I saw an opportunity to throw a stick bomb into 3 goats that were all within 2 inches of each other.
Ooh.
So I was like, do I go for Dakotah here? Because if this crits and it goes well, that's like 3 goats that are dead or frenzied, and like that's the game. Or do I save it for just a scratch because it's so good? And I took a risk. I was running low on time on the clock. I said, let's go for Dakotah. Let's try it. I didn't get a single crit, so it didn't matter. So that did not go as planned. And then his next activation, he charged in an orc on a point that I kind of needed to live. And because I didn't have just a scratch, I lost that orc. So it's one of those things where you kind of think back and, you do the best you can at the time. But that put me, under the gun, at the end of the game. So at the end of the game, I'm just kind of trying to figure out, I don't even know what the score is. I know I'm kind of losing on paper. It doesn't feel great. And I'm like, I'm not going to do the math in my head, but like, what can I do every single activation to be as efficient as possible and maximize every point that I can? And so I just played the game by that kind of, with that kind of mindset. And what it led me to do was basically say, all right, I think he's got Robin Ransack left unused. So all my orcs are going to be touching each other. So he literally cannot score it, because if he's exactly 1 inch from my orc and my base is an inch and my guy's touching the base, he won't be able to get Robin Ransack. And I was like, I also need to score 1 more primary point. And I was trying to figure out how to do that. So let me just, because this was a crazy game. I'm trying to go back through my head to remember the final sequence of events. I mean, you probably remember better than I do because you were observing it in the.
I do. So what's interesting about the final thing is Orion, he made a move and then he kept saying that he booted the game away. And I talked to him afterwards. Yeah. And he said that he thinks he could have won the game if he just activated his operatives in a different order.
Okay.
But, coming down to those final seconds on the clock, you make mistakes, right?
Right.
So in the end, I think Orion charged and tried to get Executioner or something. He tried to get Robin Ransack?
Mm-hmm.
Robin Ransack off. One. Yeah. And you had a model within 3 inches, so he couldn't do it. And then your final 2 activations was to steal a point away by activating 2 models, I think, to charge one of his Felgors.
Which both had 1 APL. So I was like, how do I solve this puzzle with 2 dudes who were stunned, right?
Yeah, sick.
So the Dakotah boy, and I literally was like watching the clock run down. I had like 10 seconds left, and I was like, okay, this can't work, this can't work, this can work. I was like, oh yeah, I got to do this. Like the comms does a mission extra 1 less. So I was like, Dakotah boy charges and passes, comms charges this guy, and then loots the point for 1 less or whatever it was, or secures it. I think we were playing secure. And then I was like, all right, boom, like pencils down. And I was like, I don't know what the score is, but that's the best I could have possibly done. So, and then we tallied it up. Yeah.
Yeah, which was sick. I know, I guess you thought you were losing. Orion thought he was losing. And then it just turned out to be a tie, which is super cool.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like that game too, like going back to the turn one play I did with the Grot, it might have been a little greedy. And the games that I've lost with orcs or tied or not, that have been like maybe could have been wins, I often find myself throwing the Grot away too early. Because especially with Felgor and especially with Secure and him having to, he was already on the back foot, even if it was a 4-2 turn, he has to move forward and attack my models. If the Grot stays alive the whole game and just sequentially goes, like he has to leave, 1 or 2 goats on a point to prevent me from stealing it, So not only did I mess up my activation advantage by giving him the Grot right away, and I threw the bomb squig into a single model to get eliminate guards. So now all of a sudden he's out activating me, which is always bad. But the Grot, just for a 1 point swing, it maybe could have been a 2 point swing or a 3 point swing if I had kept him alive and just been safer about taking these points. So I not only would have kept the activation advantage, I also would have been able to steal points that he walked off of or prevent his models from being able to walk off them. So thinking back, that probably was a little aggressive on my part, but anyway, no regrets. In a tournament like this, especially at that high level of play on stream, under clock pressure against a great opponent, like you're just doing the best you can. And I think we both made small mistakes. Nothing like that was like obvious or glaring, but I mean, I'm just happy it was a really, really good game. We both shook hands after, and like it was just those games are so rare and so hard to come by. So it's just one of those experiences that's really, always fun to look back on and think about like what you could have done differently or how it worked out or how close of a game it was. Yeah.
Now, before we move on to the final the 2 matches, this one, I know that you and me talked a little bit before LVO about clock rules and stuff like that. How did these clock rules and how did you feel with these clock rules? Because I know that you were kind of bummed about some of the stuff that happened before, and it seemed like you either practice on them or you did really, you played really well on a clock. I was, a lot of people in the Kill Team community, I think, are really still scared of the clock, but maybe it's because of how they're being implemented in different areas. How did you think they were implemented at LVO, and do you think that should be more or less the standard? Is there anything you didn't like about it?
I thought they were implemented well. I liked the somewhat softer approach to it. But like you mentioned, to backtrack just a minute to give more context to the story, the weekend prior to LVO, I went down to the UTC tournament in the Baltimore area, and I've played on clocks a few times. I usually forget to hit my clock, and we run out of time, and then we both agree like, let's just play it out anyway. But more and more clocks have been a part of the discussion as the community has grown, as we've gotten to a higher level of like competitiveness as a community as a whole, as we're having bigger tournaments with more at stake, So I get it. I get the argument for it. And, prior to LVO, I had really been kind of anti-clock. Though I will say there are some games I've played in tournaments where my opponent is clearly taking a lot more time. We run out of time and we're not on the same page, and they don't think they took more time and they don't want to talk it out or play it out or whatever. And you end up getting penalized for that. So more and more I'm coming around to liking the idea of clocks, especially when there are stakes. And I do think that, I don't think we've found the perfect solution yet, but I think we're getting closer. And I do like the idea of the fact that, you guys had a bit of a like, sort of like if it was close to the end of time and the players wanted to play and we had a couple extra minutes, we could play it out. Obviously on stream, we stopped it. Like, I don't know. I think I like the LVO rules. The one thing I did notice was that like, because it wasn't as black and white at the very end, it wasn't like your time ended and like pencils down. It was like you could finish your last activation. Players were incentivized to spend several minutes on that last activation, which again, I'm not saying is good or bad. It was just something I noticed, like in the game with Orion. But yeah, no, I think more and more I am coming around to them. And I think it does come down to just a lack of familiarity, that was kind of what turned me off of them. And also a style of play. I am definitely a more analytical player. I think about things carefully, and if you give me more time, I probably will take that time, to try and play an optimal game. But prior to LVO, I had a couple, I'd say, kind of negative experiences on the clock, not because of the players using them, but just because of the way the game ended due to running out of time.
Absolutely.
And I got kind of annoyed and angry and a bit upset about it. But the way I work is I was like, all right, like I'm not going to quit this game and I'm not going to end up like having this happen to me again. So I like use that to like kind of fuel my rage and my training montage. And I practiced a bunch on the clocks and I just was more cognizant of it and I got more used to it. And while I will say overall that I'm still not perfect on them. And when you play with a clock, you're definitely a bit more on edge the whole time. I do more and more understand and appreciate the need for them when you're really at a high level of competitive play under a time limit, because people are never going to completely see the game in the same way when you're so in your head the whole time. So to be able to point to a clock and be like, no, you actually did take 10 minutes longer.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is a good tool to have, because then it prevents drama and arguments and he said, she said, and feels bads, because you can't get angry at the calculator. It's just a calculator.
Yeah. It's interesting. We only had like one real like clock penalty, two players ran out of time and I had to go and reverse the decision because I gave them extra time, but I didn't know one player ran out of time. One player still had like 15 minutes, right? Or 8 minutes. So like, what's interesting is that I don't think that there's any real, other than that one, negative interactions with the clock. And another interesting thing was with our clock rules, and each game on a clock ended up actually ending up at like 2 hours and 10 minutes. So you actually got a little bit longer to play your games,
right?
Rather than us running around and telling everyone dice down if you actually used a clock. So, with our 30-minute breaks in between each round, that actually ended up being like perfect, like there's no reason for us to be clock Nazis, so I think that from an organizer's perspective, they went over really well and we didn't get any complaints, which I've heard of complaints from either people having clocks or not having clocks. Because also the thing is that when you allow people to clock other people or have a clock, right?
Yeah.
If somebody chooses not to play on a clock, then it's on them. Yeah. Right. So you chose not to. So, it's not necessarily the organizer's fault for not allowing them or something. Right.
If your game didn't finish, then you could have chosen to play on a clock, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I do like that. I do like the fact that if one player chooses to, the other one has to, because, otherwise there is no way to disincentivize or point, actual statistics to slow play. So I think it is interesting that I've seen, some other people, like I know Travis around here, at least prior to LVO, he went to LVO and put himself on the clock each game just to see how it felt, and how the rules went. I know prior to LVO, he had more of a, like, if you run out of time, you lose kind of policy. I don't know if he's since changed his mind or thought about that, but yeah, it's very, I can see arguments for everything and I can see arguments for both, but while I do now more and more appreciate what the clock offers, I am still the kind of guy who's like, if it's a close game and we have a couple activations left and we can finish this game in 5 minutes and know who actually won, I would still rather do that.
Obviously. Oh yeah.
And so like if there's any way in the rule set to allow for, say one player ran out of time and the other player has 30 seconds left on their clock, if both players can agree and the TOs can agree to say, hey, can we see this last turn out to its completion? I kind of like the idea of that still, but talk to me again in a couple months after having played on more clocks, and maybe I'll be more of like no, dude, like you have your hour, I have my hour, and if you don't use it effectively, like GG. I don't know. I don't know, but if nothing else, it's interesting and kind of exciting. It's another puzzle, just like Kill Team, that we as a community are trying to solve and, buff or nerf or, figure out what the best rule set is for. So
absolutely,
it is cool to have all these different mindsets coming through to hopefully find the best solution going forward.
Yeah. So moving on to your final two games, and then we'll go on to some stats. You played Kellen Foster, the West Coast champ.
Mm-hmm.
He brought novitiates. Everyone's talking about how good they were, and not surprisingly, they did really well at the tournament overall.
Yeah.
The faction as a whole.
Yeah.
So, how was it going into his novitiates? I would believe that orcs slaughter them.
Yes. I think it's one of those other matchups that it's just like Star Striders, where it's like Star Striders, Corsairs, novitiates. I think they're just so tough. So tough, especially on Into the Dark again, where I can just stage and hide and be safe and not get shot from vantage or anything. He played a really, really good game, and I was kind of planning to go 4-2 in the first turn, but because of an APL shift and a couple extra inches of movement, he gave the I think that one's called the Penitent, right? With the double-handed.
The one that can get you like a 17-inch move.
Exactly.
Some bullshit.
Yeah, 3 APL and like move really far and open the door and toss a crack grenade in. Like that's what he had threatened. So I had my knob stage there. I had to actually just retreat my knob and just be like, I'm not going to take this, but I'll take the 3/3 this turn. It was a tough one, I think, for him in terms of a matchup. This was the map which I'm not sure I love. It's a GW map where there's 3 kind of distinct lanes, right? And the only way you change from lane to lane is like through this big center black hole of a room. So once you've picked your lane, like you live there, like you don't go anywhere else. And if you go into the middle of the room, you just get shot. So I had played this a few times and I kind of knew my strategy. So what I did was I put the grot in the middle just to hold my home objective. And I want to say we were playing loot on this one because I think the grot stayed there the whole time. I can't remember. Maybe it was capture, maybe it was secure. I'm not sure. But I committed as little as possible to that big room, which is how I tend to play Into the Dark on these maps where we have this huge room that you just can't you can't be safe in, from objective to objective. And then I put all my other orcs kind of half and half. I had, a dynamite thread on each side. I had an APL.
Is that the same one that we played on? Back in Nova?
It might have been. It was a similar setup, but ours might have been slightly different in terms of the doors and the maneuverability. But Fair. I can't remember, but it felt similar to that, right?
Yeah.
So he put most of his operatives in the center and kind of lost a turn or so of movement, like hiding behind doors or waiting to filter into the main room. And I think he only put like 2 operatives, maybe 3 operatives in each of the side rooms to my like 5 on each. And I just was like, I'm just going to hit these sides really hard. And then if I win these sides, I can just protect them or then filter into the middle. And he wasn't incentivized to jump back to my home objective because it was just a grot there. And if he did, I still had dudes, who could run out of that door into the center to countercharge them. But I think it was just kind of maybe, and I talked to him after the game about this, how I would have maybe played it, but I think he played maybe a few too many operatives in the middle. But that being said, it's one of those matchups where it's just hard. Novitiates are not great in combat. And that's where they fold, right? They can manipulate a lot of dice defensively against shooting. But once you get into combat and just start hitting them with 4 or 5 damage profiles, like, if you get 3 hits, they're just dead, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Like you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. One interesting thing about at least how I play Into the Dark with like horde type teams, I like to go to 2 rooms, like 2 of the lanes on the symmetrical boards.
Yeah.
Because like instead of just 1 or all 3, because whenever I go all 3 with a horde, I lose.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's interesting. I mean, I think there definitely is an argument to be made Into the Dark for, depending on the team, like, just as little as possible on one side, just to hold them off long enough and really push hard on the other. I tend to take a bit of a more balanced approach with orcs, but also they are very tough. And they have 2 dynamites. They have 2 ways to shift APL. They have a bunch of shooting, a bunch of combat. So you can kind of like be balanced about it. And do decently well. But that was kind of my plan. I was like, I should win one of these sides and then just hold a 4-2 for the whole game and then just kind of get my tac ops, which are all, eliminate guards, rob and ransack, and route for the most part.
Yeah. So your last one was against another Vet Guard player, Chris Baki. And I talked to Jimmy afterwards and it was interesting. I was like, hey, so you just recently played Chris and you recently played me. Like, do we play similarly or do we play different? He's like, oh, Chris plays way different than you. And I was like, oh man, I didn't get to watch any of Chris's games. So I'm very excited to go back and watch his game on stream.
Yeah.
How was this game? How did this turn out for you?
This game was good. It turned into, like, again, going into Chris, he's a great player and a really, really great person to play against, because like he's not looking to like get anything up on you. He plays a very clean game, and I try and play a very clean game as well. But yeah, no, it was a pleasure to play him again. The only other time I played him prior was actually the last game of LVO last year. So
Nice.
we always tend to beat on the last round of these big tournaments. But yeah, I was exhausted at that point, and I was a little bit like, I was just assuming Orion was going to take it because he seemed on a path to victory, and if he took it, he would guaranteed win the whole thing. So I just put that out of my mind. I was like, I'm just going to do the best I can here. I made a bit of a mistake in my tack up selection to start, which I don't really ever do, but I chose the faction tack up, where you have to kill an enemy operative on turn 1, and then you reveal it, and then you have to control more objectives than the other team on turn 2.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was difficult to score against Vetguard.
Yeah, difficult to score against Vetguard, and especially on this map. I forget like if I had taken it and forgotten I had taken it, because I had just been taking the same 3 tack ups for most of the tournament, and then I had deployed in such a way that made it very hard for me to kill that first operative. And this was the map where you have that long kind of center chamber, that you kind of go down, that takes you like 3 turns to get to their objective. You know, that one, the GW one. So, and then I also had like been like, I'm going to try something different here. I'm not going to do sneaky git, and I'm not going to shush. I'm going to save all my CP for later in the game, because I could guarantee that I could get one of these objectives and hold a 3-3 on the first turn. So, and then like I go into the first turn and I'm like, did I make a mistake and choose the wrong tack op, or did I just forgot I chose it and deploy incorrectly? But I literally just completely prevented myself from scoring a point on that period. So I was already going into turn 1 being like, oh man, like this was a mistake. Like this was a huge mistake. And I'm like, here we go. Now I'm not even going to score anything on this tack up. Now I'm going to work later on the primary. And we went 3-3 in the first turn. But I was just able to play a really conservative game and not let the spotter enter too much into it. Use the Vetguard bodies again to hide in combat in melee.
Nice.
And then when I wanted to, affect a point, I would get a second orc in there again in melee, and then I'd have more IPL on the point to do the mission action, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I don't remember if there were any like key plays over the course of the game. I was just able to play the positional game very, very well. Chris had a very unlucky Melta shot where he rolled up to shoot an orc and just whiffed and didn't kill it, which then was like, all right, well, now this Melta is in combat and gone. So that was unfortunate. And I was also able to completely avoid the demo the whole game just by like continuously measuring his threat ranges. And I think Chris maybe got a little concerned about one flank, so the demo guy was running over to one side of the board one turn, and then next turn he was running back to support the other flank. So the demo guy had his hands full, but never ended up managing to get a mine off, I don't think, which was a big, big win for me.
Absolutely.
And the spotter was only able to flip someone's order once to fire a frag grenade into 2 orcs, but it didn't do enough to kill either of them, I don't think.
I dislike doing the frag move.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you always hope it's going to do more than it does.
It's juicy. It's juicy, especially with lethal 5, but against orcs, I don't think it's ever going to kill him unless you roll all crits.
Agreed.
But he wounded a couple orcs. The biggest thing in the whole game was he had a lot of secondary points tied up in this one area of the board on my right side, his left side. He had a secure access point, and he had a secure, what was it? Secure center line, was it? I can't remember the ones he took. What are the other ones for Vetguard? The secure center line.
Protect assets, hold them back.
That's what it was. It was protect assets. He took protect assets, secure access point, and control 2, control more.
Okay, and fast. Okay.
Exactly. So I had kind of learned the hard way against in my game against Vivek that like I just can't let them score these security tac ops easily. So I tried really hard this game, and I was very aware of how many orcs were on points, who was dying, when to use just a scratch. And I was able to, I don't even know how, but I was able to deny him all of his secondaries the whole game.
Wow.
So
nice.
I saved my orcs put him really far back, played really conservative, saved all my CP. So every turn I had Retain a Save on, every turn I had Dakotah on, every turn I had just a scratch on because I hadn't spent anything pregame. And I was able to just have enough bodies to deny him that access point. I was able to keep enough orcs alive and in combat that he only killed one on an objective at any given turn, or the ones when I detonated my bomb squeak, I made sure he was off the objective, and then I was also able to just hold 3, I think, for the whole game to deny him his control 2, control more.
Amazing.
So it was really tight, and I just played incredibly cagey and incredibly slow and deliberate. And I think that was probably the difference in that game. But again, really, really good game. And like we said at the beginning of this interview, I think Chris could have won the whole tournament had he won that game and the other result stood.
So another thing that's interesting is when we look at the top 8, it's very, very much melee centric, right? Mm-hmm. And so we had Vetguard and we have Kasserkin in the top 8. Mm-hmm. But to me, the top 8 is it's a weird metric to go by, right? So when you look at Nova, if we look at the top 8 from Nova, mm-hmm. for this event was literally twice as big as Nova.
Right.
So like we would have to look at the top 16 if we were to look at practically any other event, the percentage wise. So I think it's better to look at maybe like the top 10% of an event when it gets so high.
I think that's fair. Cause also like, for example, like I forget, I don't know where Chris finished, but he was like in it to win it the whole thing.
He was.
But then because of one game or a series of events in one game, he finishes out of the top 8 and then doesn't get talked about. So again, like great player, he killed it the whole tournament. But mm-hmm. like you said, I think you're right. The final results of a tournament, the top 8 is kind of seems like an arbitrary metric sometimes.
Yeah. So he actually ended up losing. He dropped to 9th because he tied Jeremy in victory points, but completed less secondaries.
Gotcha.
But that's specifically because he scored very poorly against Orion in the Felgor matchup and then yourself. Game, yeah. But he did well in literally every other thing.
Right, in every other game, yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty fascinating to see that in a pure Swiss environment, every game does matter. And when you are playing in such a large tournament, a single loss can drop you quite a far ways rather than like if you're playing in a normal 16-person tournament, you lose one, you might drop 1 or 2 spots. Right. It's just like everything is a little amplified.
Exactly.
But if we look at the top 12 players at LVO, we have 4 shooty lists and 6 shooty armies and 6 melee armies. So overall the top like 10-ish%, we have a very equal meta and equal top of the field. There was pretty much just Vetguard and Kommandos and Felgor were the only armies that really showed up twice in the top 12, right? Okay. Which is six of the top 12 lists, right? Which is also an arbitrary number, but we're going with the top 10% because Felgor Ravagers, placed 3rd and 4th. Vetguard was 2nd and 9th. Kommandos was yourself at 1 and Mike Cortez at 5.
Nice.
So very, very fascinating. So yeah, that was fun. You had an amazing run. Amazing for the community. I've never heard anything negative about you or your play. Again, bro, like your hobby is sick. Again, I'm giving you so many double compliments because you literally deserve it, dude. Like there's probably no one better that could have won and taken Ace's crown away that I would be more happy to talk to on this podcast for. So
thank you, man. I genuinely from the bottom of my heart, I genuinely appreciate it. It was a lot of travel and a lot of competition, a lot of mental strain, but I'm glad I did it. Glad we got it done for the good old US of A. But yeah, no, just the usual shout outs to my gaming club locally, the Brooklyn Strategist. I'm officially now a member of the Brooklyn Rats, so shout out to those guys. I'm looking forward to hanging out with the squad and organizing some more events for the community and NYO next year and all that. And of course, as always, a big shout out to my friends and family and wife and everything. You know, they support me a ton while I'm on the road, you know, digitally while I'm there, even though they have no idea what's going on in the game. They send all their love and support, and it always means a lot. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody that kind of has played with me or against me or supported me throughout this journey. It's honestly incredibly surreal to be here, you know, with the stats that we've seen this year, with the tournament wins and yeah, just with the success. It's been absolutely unreal.
Absolutely. Now it's your goal to go back to the World Championships and defeat Australia for America. Now they did it. They stopped Spain, right? Now we have to stop Spain again and
Australia.
Now we have to stop Australia too.
We have to start fights with everyone.
That's what we do best as Americans. Yeah. G, is there anything you want to shout out, brother?
Yeah, of course. You can find me on Instagram at wargaming_studios. Again, that's wargaming_studios. I am adding the last few models to the Casterkin. That way I can get to avoiding painting my Hearthkin, faster that way. You can join the conversation with us on Discord. We have the Discord link in the show notes. And last, I want to shout out our patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for what you do. And we will be having a new redacted episode for you very soon.
Mm-hmm. So that should be exciting. I'd like to shout out also our Patreons. And also, you guys are going to get another episode here with Adrian, myself, and Giacomo talking about all of LVO stats and a highlight of our narrative event at LVO. So don't be afraid to, on your next morning commute to check that one out. So until next time, everyone.
The Squad Games podcast is a production of Squad Games Entertainment. For more information on Squad Games, please visit our website at lestersworkshop.com/squad-games.